Guys! I finished Dark Souls 2. God, that final boss, Solaire, was really tough. But I triumphed.
Spoilers.
Guys, welcome to Push to Shout. Solaire is the final boss of Dark Souls 3.
He could be.
He is.
We'll have to wait for Vadi Video to see what.
No, he's right there. He goes, this is what happens. You enter the final boss arena, and then he says, "Praise the sun." And then only Afro shows up and shakes your hand and says, "Congratulations."
all your favorite Dark Souls memes show up, and they all clap their hands at you and say congratulations.
Yes.
I completed Dark Souls 3. I did it. We took last week's episode off. I was on sabbatical playing Dark Souls 3, and now 400 hours later, I finally completed it. No, I was sick, and then my air conditioner was broken, and we never got around to doing an episode last week.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've completed it. I did it. I completed Dark Souls 3.
So, I think I just want to say, spoiler warning, Dark Souls 3.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the game.
We're going to talk about it the whole time. I mean, we've got other stuff to talk about, but we're going to talk about Dark Souls 3 the whole time.
Yeah, basically. But, okay, well, let's get the non-Dark Souls 3 stuff out of the way. I don't really have anything non-Dark Souls 3 related. I mean, just some real-life business.
Substantial. There was a Game of Thrones episode, but
wow.
Nothing happened.
I stopped watching because I just got bored.
Yeah, nothing happened in the episode, so.
Okay.
And I think maybe I've given up on Rainbow Six Siege unless there's an update that fixes a lot of stuff, because God, that game sucks. It's not a bad concept. It's not even a bad game. It's just a badly supported game with a huge amount of network issues, glitches and exploits that people can use to bullshit their way to a victory. Just a bunch of bullshit that it shouldn't have. That should be easy to fix. That hasn't been fixed. And some of it's really simple, like you can't change your loadout, which is a really important part of the game, while you're waiting for a match. And speaking of waiting for matches, sometimes it just seems to kick you out of the queue, and you'll be waiting forever, and you have to re-queue. It's bad.
The matchmaking system, I basically only played it when it first came out, and the matchmaking system was very bad then, and is really not that much better now.
I mean, I don't know. Casual seems all right, but ranked sucks. And I don't know if it's because nobody's playing or if it's just because it's bad. But it seems broken. Like, it seems like there's actually recreatable ways to tell if you're not in the queue, because it'll be like some people have left it running just to see, and it'll run for 30 minutes and never find a match. So and then you start again, and 2 minutes later you're in, which is just bullshit. And that's one of literally like 100 issues that don't seem to be addressed, because Ubisoft's really bad at reaching out to the community, and seems to be bad at, not only with Rainbow Six, but with all their games, they seem to be kind of bad at supporting them. So yeah, it sucks. Because it sucks, because it should be such a great game. Like, I love the concept. I love the game itself. If it was made by a developer, or just supported by a developer that actually cared, then it would probably be very successful, or at least very fun for me. But it's just the technical issues that hold it back. So that sucks. I hope someone copies the formula. But when you've got competition like CSGO out there, you have to get the little things right, the way that Valve does, and they don't. So, boo. But that's the only other video game I've played other than Dark Souls. So.
I have played a little bit of The Calling, which is that like Hunger Games game, and it's exactly what you'd expect it to be. It's like you know what the Hunger Games is, though.
Yes.
And it's basically
and I know
just that.
There's like a million games that are like that.
Well, it's like a competent multiplayer Hunger Games game.
Okay.
It's not super great.
By competent, I mean, is it well made, or is it like an early access piece of shit?
I think it is early access, but it's not a piece of shit.
Okay.
It works, and it's fun.
Oh, okay. Fun game. All right.
Well, that's really about all I have to say about it.
Weird.
Yeah. Okay, Dark Souls 3. I'm ready to talk about
Let's go ahead and talk about it.
Okay. So, I don't know. Where would we start?
There's a lot to say.
Actually, did you get to the secret area?
I guess there's a couple areas I actually missed. Well, there's one big
Did you get to
area
the Archdragon Peak?
Yes, I didn't miss that one.
Okay. Did you finish it?
Yes, I've
Okay.
I've beat all the bosses.
All right.
But I missed the one that I missed that I didn't even realize existed was Smoldering Lake. I
Oh,
mean,
really?
I was doing a blind run and purposely avoiding, any kind of clues or anything, or like even level names, and so that's how I just completely missed it because I literally didn't know it existed until I completed it and started looking at stuff online. And I was like, what the fuck is this?
Because that's the part where all the skeletons run at you, like a whole army
Yeah.
of skeletons.
Yeah.
So I just attacked the bridge to try to make it fall, and it did. And then I was just standing around, and it said descend. So, but that's not something everybody's gonna have happen.
Like, there's a few spots where I wouldn't know Archdragon Peak existed if there weren't for
that one's very obscure.
I mean, for some notes on the ground that said use gesture. If I had gotten, it's kind of a matter of luck because I feel like a lot of people probably would never get notes like that. And I never got a note in that area saying jump down or look down or anything like that. It just said to break the bridge. So I just never even thought to look down into the pit, assuming it was bottomless.
Yeah. I kind of like that though. That not everybody's gonna see everything in the game when I first go, and you get to that place, huh?
Yeah, and it was kind of a cool area too. It feels like what they kind of wanted Lost Izalith to be with. I think it was kind of maybe one of the weaker areas.
Oh yeah.
But still,
that I thought was kind of funny that the kind of reimagining of Lost Izalith was still like the weak part.
Well, I mean, like when there's certain things that just suck inherently about that kind of thing of level where it's like, first of all, you've got the poisonous fucking frog things that are terrible, and I hate them, and I've always hated them in all the Dark Souls games. And fire breathing or fire casting stuff is always annoying, and shit like that's always going to be a little bit grating. But I think that the ballista, as annoying as it was kind of a cool idea. I guess.
I was really stressed out when I went up there, because I was completely out of Estus. I saw like 3 wheel skeletons just wandering around on the side, and I'm like, I gotta turn this thing off, and I'm so far away from a bonfire, and I don't even know how to get back here if I wanted to, because that labyrinth is
took me forever to find my way up there.
What I thought was funny is that whole Smoldering Lake dungeon area, the labyrinth, is a Bloodborne Chalice dungeon. That's what it is. Like the layout and the aesthetic of it, it's just red. I thought that was funny. That the Lost Izalith kind of redux wound up being like a procedurally generated level,
or seemingly that way.
I mean, it was better than a Bloodborne Chalice dungeon, but not by much.
Right. It was not super inspired or anything. I did like the look of the big open lake itself. That was cool. I actually the hardest part about that wasn't the boss. It was the 2 guys guarding the ballista. If you don't pull one of those guys at a time, they're almost impossible to fight both at the same time. Maybe if you're a Dex build, which let's transition onto that. After completing the game with a strength build and then looking at stuff online, I realized how if you don't choose a Dex build, you're playing the game in a slightly harder mode than people who do choose a Dex build. It's objectively better than all the other builds.
That's always been the case, really.
But even more so now that have you heard that poise is turned off? Literally a useless stat, which makes vitality, which I put a lot of points into, a useless stat. It's insane to me. It's crazy.
I guess. I don't know.
Like the rats, I was having so much fun with the rats, and I was like, what the fuck is up with it? Like 3 rats, in some cases, would kill me and frustrate the shit out of me because they're such easy things. But they stun lock you. If they attack one at a time, they attack so quickly, they stun lock you in a way that you literally can't do anything, and that's the worst. And it feels, I don't know. I feel like I was cheated because I'm putting points into a stat that doesn't do anything.
Okay, well, it doesn't not do anything. Vitality still lets you wear armor that makes your defense a lot higher.
I mean,
but you're right.
And the defense apparently also doesn't do much for you either if you look at the stats. So it is kind of useless, especially if you consider you could be putting it into vigor.
That's one thing I found. Like this guy Josh I play with, PvP, he's just been dumping basically everything into Vigor and Dex. And now I'm at soul level 120, and he's at 125 because he just fucking had to do that. And he still has like 800 more health than me, just because he built that way. And
Yeah.
it's just so frustrating because he just always has more health, and it works. But overall, I do like the balance of the leveling in this game, particularly on a first playthrough, where in the last games there were, especially Dark Souls 1, there was resistance, which is literally a useless stat. Way more useless than vitality is, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And that, coupled with health not actually mattering all that much, you could get away with keeping your health very low in that game.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like how in this game, at least early to mid game, putting a point into increasing your health slightly actually feels like it matters.
I think even late game too.
Yeah. And stamina too.
Especially with bosses and anyone using like really, really heavy hitting weapons, there's certain bosses and stuff that will two-hit you.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes you'll be in a stun lock where it's like you can have full health and be dead. So having a lot of health sometimes minimizes that kind of thing where you can actually roll away in Estus and survive. So I did put a lot of points in Vigor, and I'm glad I did, because like I think with the Dancer there's a grab attack that they do that takes up a ridiculous amount of health, and I had enough health to survive it, but I heard of a lot of people who that was an instant death for them, and that would have made, like, I had no issue with Dancer at all.
Same.
But a lot of people.
I never got grabbed by Dancer.
I did a couple times. But yeah, I probably beat it on my third try or something, and so it just wasn't much of an issue. But yeah, that's one thing that I'll definitely credit Dark Souls 3 with, is that reading opinions online, it seems like everyone has trouble with different things.
You really like
so
to see
than they
that.
have in the previous games. Where
Yeah.
It's like, okay, Ornstein and Smell are obviously hard bosses. Now it's like we said, Dancer is hard for some people, easy for others. Watchdogs or Abyss Watchers.
Yeah.
They were hard as nails for me, and then some people have literally beat them on their first try.
Yeah.
Part of that has to do if you do the chapel first, then you're a lot higher level. But and I didn't do that. But still,
that was another thing I love to see. Is I tweeted, where did you go first? A Twitter poll. Where did you go first? The chapel or the Abyss Watchers area, the Farron Keep Swamp thing, the poison area? And it was almost exactly 50-50. That little crossroads in the game, it is designed in a way that you can really just kind of go to one place or another naturally, and it doesn't railroad you into one or the other. I was really impressed with those results.
It's interesting that it's those two areas that are the first ones to really branch off, because one's an area where you could see people being turned off because, oh, poison, I don't even want to deal with this right now. And then the other one, if you get hit by the maggot monster and you're filled with maggots and you don't know what's going on, or you go into that graveyard where the enemies respawning.
They're both not pleasant places.
Yeah, they're places where you're instantly going like, maybe I'll come back to this later. And that's what I did with the chapel. I said, I don't know if I got the maggots on me, and I didn't know how to. If you equip the torch, they burn off, which is a classic obscure Dark Souls thing. But I didn't know that, so I was like, I don't even want to deal with this. I don't know. I didn't even know what caused them. I didn't know it was the enemies that were causing them.
It took me a while to figure it out. But then when I had that ring on, wait, did I? Or was this after the fact? Either way, I know that when you have that ring on that lets you, it must have been after, because you find that ring in the chapel. But the one that makes you disappear when you roll, it's super easy to see the maggots once you have that ring on.
Yeah.
Because when you disappear, the maggots are still there. Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah, and so I chose the poison area just because that was more familiar to me. It was like, I know how to deal with a poison area. But yeah, that made the Abyss Watchers a little harder for me than other people maybe. But so speaking of the level design, that's one of the only places where it really does branch off. And that's something that I was a little bit disappointed.
I don't think so.
Super disappointed.
No,
but,
it's not. Because you can, in Irithyll, you can choose to go into the Profane Capital, or you can choose to continue on into Anor Londo, which is another big branch in the game.
Well, Anor Londo's not a big branch.
Yeah,
Anor Londo's a quick
Well,
boss.
because it happens early in Irithyll.
You go past the
yeah.
archers and into the boss.
No,
and you're
this
done.
branch happens way before that. This is when you're in the water.
Oh well, sure, because you can completely skip punts if
Yeah.
Sullivan or whatever. That's true. That's true. Yeah, I guess.
The late game, like, people I've talked to have just fought the Lords of Cinder in very different orders.
Yeah.
And that's been true of most people I've talked to. I don't know.
Yeah.
I saved Aldrich for last, I think. Did you? I don't know. What order did you fight the Lords of Cinder?
I saved Yorm for last, or I didn't save him for last. It just happened to be the one.
Yeah,
I did last.
yeah, exactly. I didn't even really think much about it, what order I wanted to fight them in. That's just how it wound up happening for me. Is that I fought Aldrich last and Yorm second.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. There's a couple branching spots. My biggest complaint is that even though it feels like there's certain areas where it definitely could do this. It doesn't. It doesn't have that winding back on itself quality. It does on an individual area basis, but not on a meta entire worldwide basis. Because you're basically, I mean, it is essentially the main path is extremely linear. You've got the initial area in the actual walls itself, and then you're done with that. It's Undead Village, and then you go down through the little thing onto the through to the Abyss Watchers or to the chapel, and then from there to the catacombs, from the catacombs to Irithyll, and then you've got the branching path, but neither of them come back on each other or anything like that, and you're onto the giant, and then you're done.
Bloodborne, I'd say, is about the only one that didn't do that, though. Like, Dark Souls 1, it was a pretty tight early game, and it was in a lot of ways linear. You went from the Undead Burg to the Parish, and
so
then...
I don't mind that the progression is linear. Like, here's kind of where you're meant to go, or here's like where it's easiest. This is the easiest next place to go. You don't go down into the catacombs first. And I don't mind. I wouldn't even mind if the catacombs were closed off. If it was just like, here is the path where you're supposed to kind of go. It's the fact that the world doesn't.
That is true.
Doesn't feel connected in any way. It just feels like a path. If you want to get from the profane capital to the undead village, there's one way to go. That's it. And there's certain areas where they could easily connect them. You go up through the tower in the swamp where the sleeping wolf is, and you go up the elevator, and then there's the little area up on the bridge. Just across the bridge is where the undead village is. If that was just a connection you could make, there's a connection, and that would make the world feel a little bit more connected now. And then
I suppose, but the fact that you can see it, it does do kind of the. You can't get there, but you know that it's right there
the whole time, and that's something that I've always complained about. And I don't like that quality of the game. I think it just makes the world feel a lot less special. I've got the world separated by
location
area and the progression of those areas in my head, and there's no other way to think about it, and it could be different. That's the thing, is like, even the Firelink Shrine could be connected to the castle, which I kind of understand why it isn't. It's supposed to be like its own little instance or something, kind of. But it's just weird, the areas that aren't connected but could be, and it cheapens it a little bit. Not a huge deal, but it's something that I definitely liked in Dark Souls 1 a lot better, and it was a big complaint I had in Dark Souls 2, and I don't think that this has done anything to address it other than the world actually makes sense in sense of scale rather than the way Dark Souls 2 was, where it just didn't make any sense.
Well, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, and that was both of our first impressions, is that the world itself didn't feel quite as connected as Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 1 just does that better. But really, it only does that better for the first half of the game. That takes a lot of time to do. And I don't know, it's an interesting thing, because obviously I remember the first half of that game so vividly, and all of it's great. But you really can't ignore like the last 15 hours of any playthrough. Whereas this game, even though it does feel slightly less connected, it was consistently good all the way through.
Yeah, and this one you can't separate it in halves the way you can in Dark Souls 1.
Oh,
I don't
absolutely
feel like you
not.
can. It's just one playthrough, and I like that definitely about it. Especially over Dark Souls 1, where you're right. The second half of the game
I
completely ignored
stop
any
at
kind of.
Ornstein and Smo whenever I replay that game.
Yeah, yeah, that's the place to stop. I mean, yeah, there's a couple areas I like past that, but
Like Duke's Archives is
they don't add
tolerable,
a lot.
but yeah.
Yeah, and the archives in this game are better than that.
Oh,
the
absolutely.
Archives,
Damn.
sure.
Like the individual areas, and we talked about this too last 2 weeks ago. The individual areas are amazing, and God, like
I don't like. There's a little less iconic things. Irithyll's very iconic.
Irithyll's very iconic. Archdragon Peak is great.
Archdragon Peak's cool, but
the major set piece. It's not the location itself. Like the major set piece is that boss fight. Like that.
That's the coolest.
That is iconic.
Coolest boss fight, and also I think I didn't like that boss fight because of the camera controls with the dragon.
I thought they were fine. And the second half of that boss fight is amazing.
The camera controls with the dragon were, I think this is especially damning considering this is the Souls series. I've never had that kind of trouble in any of the Souls games the way that I did.
I've had way worse trouble with the camera. It could be because I just know from experience that you should unlock the camera when fighting big enemies like that. But I mean, I had.
But then you're fighting
very
the
little
controls
trouble.
anyway.
No, you're not.
You mean unlock the camera so that you're having to control it manually?
You don't have to do much manually. It's just when you're under the dragon, you're just looking up, and if he starts to swing, then you roll. But I mean that aside, the second half of that boss fight, mechanically and aesthetically, was.
I don't get it though. I don't get what was so great about the second half. It was just
the Nameless King. It was great.
It was just standard. It was standard.
Standard? No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was. It's a humanoid with your standard attack moveset. I don't. What is special about it?
Yeah, what's so special about Artorias, dude? Right? Like, I mean, come on, he's just a human with a weapon, right?
The design of him is cool.
It's not just the design.
The boss fight itself, there's nothing special.
It's the same reason I love Champion Gundyr, is because he is just all over you. His moveset is interesting and diverse, and it is fun to fight him in a way where it feels like you're fighting a superhuman who has just got this shit, and you really have to just outplay him. And I love boss fights like that. Those are some of my favorites in the series.
Champion Gundyr, I'll give it to you. It was like relentless, and his moveset was cool. Like the way he would kick behind him and stuff was neat. But Nameless King, as cool as he was, it just didn't. It felt standard to me. It didn't feel like anything special that other bosses hadn't done.
That boss might be my favorite in the game.
Okay.
Maybe it's just the presentation of it all.
I completely disagree.
But
even
the
the
fight,
ridiculous amount of health.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's great. You really just have to. Yes.
It's tedious.
No, it's not tedious.
It's tedious.
It was so tense. It was so tense. And the time that I beat him, it was when I was 0 Estus, just a couple pixels of health.
This partially comes down to personal preference. Beautiful. This partially comes down to personal preference, but to me, it's like once I figured out the boss's moveset, and now it just expects me to do it 20 times, I get very frustrated and I don't want to do it anymore.
Well, he mixes up his moveset. Sometimes you don't. That's what I liked about it, is that you don't know when he does the charge. You really have to be cautious and see, okay, is he going to do the charge back, or is he going to wait and give me time to Estus?
Yeah.
Like, his moveset is great and diverse and interesting to fight against, and never felt like bullshit.
How did it not feel like bullshit when he
did not
hit you? He hit me.
He 3 hit me.
Sometimes without even time to recover. He has a stun lock that will take off.
No, that's one of the things I love about it, is that he does not have a stun lock. If he hits you, and hits you twice, that's a stun lock. If you roll, if you buffer a roll to happen immediately after that stun lock, you will get hit by the third attack. But if you wait, you won't. That I love bosses that do that.
When he
that
hits you twice, though, that's 3/4 of your health done.
Yeah, and
you can't move between those 2 hits.
Right. You know what that means? It
It's
means
bullshit.
now.
That's what
No, it means the next phase of the fight that you've entered is okay. Am I going to take a risk in Estus, like now? Because if I get hit again, I'm gonna die. Or am I gonna try to just keep playing this out for a while until I know I'm safe and can heal? And that's how the Champion Gundar fight worked too. That is one of the most interesting dynamics in the Souls boss fights, I think, is when, like, you know that healing is going to be a risk. That was part of what made Ornstein and Smo so great, is because 2 of them are all over you, and you can't just back away for a second in Estus. Nameless King doesn't let you do that. Champion Gundar doesn't let you do that. I really, really like that.
I didn't enjoy it the way you did.
Okay.
I've never, this is where Dark Souls kind of gets away from me as far as how I see other people enjoying the game, is that with most boss fights, my feeling with it is like, I just want to get through this. I never, that sense of euphoria that people talk about when they finally defeat the boss, I don't get that.
Really?
I get a sense of relief, and that's it. I'm like, thank God it's over, is all I think. And
that is sad. I don't feel that way at all.
It just doesn't do for me the things that it does for other
Finally
people.
Beating the Nameless King got me fucking
that's
riled.
What PvP invasions, when you get invaded and you beat your invader, that's
that riles me too.
That's way, way, way more satisfying to me than bosses.
I wouldn't say more,
frustrating because it's like, well, this is, to me, like a boss when it's designed in a way that's frustrating like that. I get mad knowing that it's just designed to be this way. Yeah, rather than just a human outplaying me, it's a designer designing a boss to be ridiculously hard and have a huge amount of health, and it just feels unfair.
I don't agree.
Okay,
none of the bosses in this game felt unfair, except maybe the big fucking tree.
I mean, whatever.
Because he just has a dumb moveset that sweeps across. He's easy, but like that's one of the ones where you just have to figure out, okay, how's he gonna move, and okay, now I figured it out, and I can beat him.
The boss, in terms of fairness, they've been probably the best of any of the series, but
there's no Capra Demon. There's no what else? Bed of Chaos. Like,
oh well, Bed of Chaos I beat on my first try.
Well, same. It was still dumb.
I don't know how people didn't know like how to do that. Like, I had no problem.
It's not about knowing how to do it.
I was using a great shield and I had like a bunch of poison, so every time they do the swipe, I could just take that.
Yeah, what gets a lot of people is that it just pushes you into holes.
Where to go, and I'd heard of people just having so much issue with that, and I just didn't.
It's not for me. I beat it on the first try too, and it's not about it being hard. It's about it being very dumb.
Yeah, in the same way that the tree boss is dumb. Sure.
Yeah.
It just, we didn't have trouble with the tree boss when people apparently had trouble with Bed of Chaos, but I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't get the satisfaction of the boss fights the way that everyone else seems to, and I'm missing out on that part of the game, sad. I guess.
That's really sad.
Which is why if I get a boss down to now, I've like kind of accepted it. Although I'm already done with the game, and I hardly did this, but I've kind of accepted it where it's like, okay, I've got the boss down to the point where like I could beat him. I'm just gonna have to try more and more until I do, and then I just summon because fuck it.
You summon for bosses?
Hell yeah! Now, I didn't for the first. I didn't until Pontiff Sullivan or whatever his name is, because when it was like.
Okay.
It was like, okay, I get what's going on with the second part. I've got him down to a chip of health, and then I get killed in the corner where I'm stuck and I can't roll out. And I was like, I don't want to do that again, so I'm just going to summon. And why wouldn't I if I don't really feel that satisfaction that everyone talks about?
Maybe that's why you don't feel the satisfaction.
I've never summoned for bosses until that.
I don't know what to say. That's dumb. That's dumb. Like,
it's dumb?
Yeah, it is. It's dumb. Because I remember Ornstein and Smo.
I think it's dumb
Let's take it back.
Your head against the wall for 2 hours trying to beat a boss.
It's not a wall. It's a challenge that you are more than capable of overcoming. And once you do, it just flutters you a bit. Or me a bit, I guess. Maybe not you, because you're a statue.
It feels like an arbitrary challenge.
It's not an arbitrary challenge. It's a single-player challenge. That's how video games work.
I guess I take. That's why I like the PvP so much. Is that I feel like I'm overcoming a challenge if I beat what seems like a good player and I've outplayed them. I don't feel that way if I'm just figuring out the game mechanics and doing what you're supposed to do.
Gives me so much satisfaction. And taking it back to Orange Phoenix Smough, I just remember time after time I would get them down to just that chip of health, and then I would die. And then the next time I'd get killed almost immediately. And it was just... By the end, it felt like I'd really mastered it. Not like I'd been able to scrape by. And, you know, its mastery is something that the game gives. It lets you discover mastery over a set of mechanics.
I felt like I slid by with Orange Phoenix Smough. I mean, I don't know. I never felt like I would mastered it. I don't feel like I master any part of these games. Like I'm always.
Oh, I totally do. Because I've played New Game Plus through now all the way through, and no boss beat me.
I don't know. I just maybe I just don't have the dedication or whatever, but I can't get to that level where it's like, oh, I feel like I've mastered it. I know what the parry timing window is and all that shit. Just
you don't gotta parry bosses. Come on. Pontiff Sulivan was also great solo.
I know that this is said over and over on the internet, but the whole Dark Souls community idea of you're doing it the wrong way because you're parrying him or you're doing this or that the wrong way is always really frustrating because it's just like you're setting these challenges for yourself. You don't need to set them for other people.
There is a line. There is a line. Like, clearly, yes, it's overbearing when people say, "Oh my God, you're putting a single point into Dex. What the fuck is wrong with you? You're not getting the true Dark Souls experience."
Yeah.
Every true Dark Soul needs to put on full armor and fat roll through the whole game with no health. But there's a line though. Like if you summon for every area and go through the game, it lets you breeze through the game. It lets you breeze through bosses.
That's why I get so much satisfaction out of invading people who have summoned in like early parts of the area where it's clearly their first playthrough and stuff.
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
You're just breezing through this fucking game with your friends, and I'm here to fuck your shit up.
Yeah, it's nice. And then
that's why
the multiple players in the world, they draw more invaders in. It's great.
Yeah. I like that mechanic, although it's frustrating as an invader because like you almost always get put into a 2v1 or 3v1 situation. But I don't really complain about that because it's still fun to like try your best against all those people, unless it's just a total gang squad that's got you in a corner or something. But I've had so much fun invading. It's been definitely the most satisfying part of the game to me. I wouldn't still be playing it if it weren't for the PvP stuff.
Oh yeah, the PvP's got me going.
I'm not very interested in all at the Fight Club, bow before you PvP and all that shit. Like that's just it's not a good enough PvP game
exactly
to do that.
It is not a honor duel kind of game, and these games never were, even though people play it that way. I play that way sometimes, but
sometimes, especially against friends. But.
Yeah, but the real fun is just doing fun shit. For example, me and Michael have been doing Gank Squat, which is so we go on the tower on the wall bonfire in the high wall of Lothric. Everybody take notes. And there is a patch of grass behind 3 of those tree hollow things, where if you do this stretch out gesture and lay down, you are almost completely invisible. Especially if you wear the Nameless King's hat with the hair. It's the same color as the weeds.
You're like the Marines, like in the grass.
Yeah, and so one of us is a red phantom, the other's hiding in the grass. And when we get invaded, we beckon the red over and go, "Hey!" And we lure them over to the edge of the wall there, and one of us boxes them in, and the other gets up from the grass, and it's just great. And
that's pretty good.
Also, another hint for the fellows at home is if you go into the Road of Sacrifice, not like the poison swamp, but like the swampy, foresty area, there is some water that is deep enough to slow you down. And in that water are lily pads. And the lily pads, if you lay down under them, you are completely invisible. You cannot be seen at all. It is fantastic. It is Oh man, I've had so much fun with the PvP in this game.
All the areas have little quirks about them that makes PvP incredibly fun.
Yeah.
The first place that I had a lot of fun PvPing in was the Fear-Filled Dungeon, where you've got that initial part where there's 2 levels.
Oh yeah.
People always end up, especially when they're in a fight with you or something, they always end up falling down to the lower level, or they just start down there or whatever, and they never look up. And it's so easy to get the drop on people. And I have my +9 Claymore, and I can never commit to use the slab to make anything +10.
But, they give you good number of slabs.
Yeah, I've got quite a few now, but I'm still like I don't know what I want. I've got a +10 Claymore. I've got a +9 Zweihander. So whatever. But it does enough damage where a lot of people will be one hit, especially if they've got taken some damage when you do the drop attack, and that's just the most satisfying thing ever. And then the archives have been a lot of fun too.
The archives are great for PvP.
Yeah, especially because if they have made it all the way through or almost all the way through, they get to there's 3 NPCs that are like whatever humanoids, and they're super hard. And you can totally use those to fuck people over.
Yeah.
Especially if they don't know it's coming.
On several occasions, I've just gone into the archives alone and just used a dry finger to just draw the invaders in. Mm-hmm. And it's great. It's so much fun.
That's another thing about the archives. If you're looking to just make people fight each other, that would be the perfect place to just use a white branch or whatever and get in the corner and nobody would ever find you.
Yeah, it's so dense.
Yeah. So yeah, that is the most fun part of the game to me for sure, and the satisfaction of beating someone against the odds where they have phantoms and shit is
absolutely
so great. I love that.
Especially when you can just kind of exploit a little frame trap and just unlock a phantom to death, like while the host whiffs past you, and then you just turn around and they're like, "Oh shit!" and they start running away. Man, so much great stuff happens in the PvP in this game.
So yeah, that's been a lot of fun. But main game, it is objectively the best in the series.
I agree.
It doesn't feel iconic the way that Dark Souls 1 did, but it does pretty much everything except the world design better than Dark Souls 1, I think. It's maybe a little bit too iterative. It doesn't have some things in it that it should have, like the things that Dark Souls 2 improved upon that they for some reason threw out. There's a couple mechanics actually they should have changed the way Dark Souls 2 did this, but they changed it in a way that doesn't feel effective. The scaling for multiplayer is weird and locking certain levels out. Like you can only invade certain levels in your level range and summon certain levels in your level range. That's weird. I don't really get that. What do you mean why?
Why is that weird?
Why is that weird?
That's how it's always worked.
It's how it's always worked, but that means the right way to do it. Because it's locking, I mean, it feels like if you're going to scale the levels, then why restrict the level at all? And then why not scale the weapon upgrades, but scale the levels? It just doesn't make sense to me.
It makes sense to me. They don't want players who are level 120 invading in the first area in the game and fighting people who are literally brand new.
But if you're going to do that, that's like level 20
if you're going to do that, you at least need a new character. And the weapon scaling, I also think makes sense because it means if they did scale the weapons down, it would mean that upgrading your weapons and spending any kind of resources or time or attention on them to like get good to you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You are expected to invest in your weapons in both multiplayer and single player. There's an incentive to, and that also means that they can't have high-level players playing with low-level players because low-level players do not have access to the same upgrades.
But it's all meaningless when you can only be matched up with people who have around the same upgrades.
No, because they upgrade different weapons. That's the key.
So scale the weapons down, but if you use an unupgraded weapon, then it's even more scaled down. Just scale it down to the
what?
Scale it down to conceptually the equal footing as the person you're invading. For example, if you're invading to a lower level, scale it down. You've got a +10 weapon, but it only does as much damage as their +4 weapon or whatever. And then if you switch to a +1 weapon, then it's way less powerful. Then it's only as powerful as their +1 weapons. I don't know what's confusing about that.
Well, the +1 weapon is as powerful as their +1 weapon. A +1 weapon is a +1.
That's what I mean, though. Is like scale it. If you're already scaling the stats, so scale the weapons too. I just don't get it.
It makes perfect sense to me.
Okay.
I think you need that incentive for players to upgrade their weapons.
There'd still be the incentive to upgrade the weapon, because if you didn't have an upgraded weapon, then you'd be below there. You'd be.
What? Oh, do you mean like if I got a +10 and your max is a +4, then make my +10 a +4? I don't agree with that.
Why not?
I would rather just not be able to invade newbies, because the +10 weapon is just more powerful. It's stronger. You put the resources in. It should be. It requires a Titanite slab, which is a scarce resource.
You put the resources in your stats, but they're being scaled down, so what's the difference?
Because the stats...
The fact that you're having to think about it is proving my point. They've gone halfway, and I don't like the halfway measure. Either don't do it or do it. It doesn't make sense.
I think you can still make a case for the stats. Like, in general, people are going to build into strength and stamina, like almost for sure. And then the specialization comes in like dexterity or strength or quality or magic. And so they preserve builds, but not the relative strength of the build by scaling stats down.
Okay.
If they were to scale weapons, they would undermine investing in weapons in general. Scaling stats down preserves your build. You invest in a build. But weapons, you invest in individual weapons. So I think it still makes sense.
But if you don't invest in those weapons, then you'd be on a lower playing field than the people you're invaded, because they have at least invaded. I mean, they have at least maybe upgraded to +2 or something like that.
I don't know.
It's not a big deal, but that drives me crazy that like I can't invade my friends who are playing through earlier parts or something. No.
I guess you can't invade them, but you can play with them.
40 something. Yeah, you can play with them. You can summon and stuff, but it's just. I mean, whatever. I probably wouldn't be able to invade anyway because there's thousands of people playing. But still, conceptually, it just feels like a weird restriction that's a half measure.
I mean, I don't know. I think it makes sense that late game characters should not be able to play with early game characters.
Okay.
Anyway, I want to talk about the last boss. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Dude, that's
another one that
the best last boss in the series.
Okay. I think it's equal to and basically the same as Dark Souls 1.
The second half, the first half is baller, where he uses a complete player's moveset. He uses strength weapons, he uses dex weapons, he uses magic, he uses pyromancy and poison. It's really awesome. And it works with the story, too. Because that's a much better way to communicate that the fire has been linked endless times, and many kingdoms have rose and fell, and there is a cycle. It's better just to show this amalgamation of Dark Souls player characters. Like, the entire moveset is there, and then, of course, the second half, he's Gwyn.
I feel like maybe it's just undermined by the second half, then. Because the second half, to me...
A lot.
It just... I don't know.
Really?
God.
It's
kind of underwhelming.
Dude, you are not
I'm such a
you're not vibing with this game, are you?
I just don't see what's so special about the second half being basically Gwyn.
It's not just basically Gwyn. It's one, way more intense, and two, it makes the whole prospect of linking the fire even more hopeless. Like, you put him down, but this thing just won't. The fire, I mean, it just won't die. And even if you let the world fade to dark, Eventually, the flames will reappear just in the distance, the Firekeeper says. And yeah,
I don't know what that has to do with Gwyn being the second half.
What do you mean? It has everything.
I don't know what you mean.
Gwyn was not released of his burden. It's just, it weighs on everything and everyone forever. The story in this game, too, is the best in the series.
I did totally disagree with that, too.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I thought Dark Souls 1, the world was way, way, way better built. Like, it had a story behind it, and every aspect of it had a story. And maybe I'm missing a lot, and I haven't delved deep enough into the lore. But 3, to me, like, the areas don't feel like they have as much meaning behind them.
Well, the areas are a different question from the story.
What I mean is the world itself doesn't feel like it has an interesting story, beyond the fact that it's another kingdom that has gone through the light and the dark. It doesn't... What is the story of that kingdom?
The story of that kingdom's great, with Lothric. The Prince Lothric, not the location Lothric.
I know who Lothric is. I thought his individual story was good. I liked it. It was cool. How his brother is like...
Each of the lords
crippled himself with his curse, and then he's on his brother's back. That was awesome. That was my favorite boss fight.
That was a great boss fight. But each of the lords of Cinder has a different motivation for leaving their throne. And Lilith has his own motivation for staying there. And it's all totally clear and understandable if you just read a little bit.
But it doesn't...
And one thing I love that this game does, that the first just wasn't able to, just by virtue of being the first, is that sometimes you would get those cool glimpses at other places in the mythos, like Astora. What's Astora like? And Katarina, what's over there? And that was interesting. I liked it. I don't want to, make that unclear. But they were still kind of abstract and vague. Like, you can't really think of them as real places so much. You just have little bits and pieces of it.
Yeah, but Dark Souls 3 world that I'm talking about in 1.
Dark Souls 3 is able to take the world of 1 and the characters and bosses of 1, and that is now the mythos. Like, when you find, like, for instance, the Nameless King. The Nameless King is Gwyn's exiled son.
Yeah,
that was fantastic, and it just makes so much sense. And you can even see that castle from Anor Londo in the first game, off in the distance. It was just a different keep somewhere, and it just makes perfect sense in retrospect that his son allied with the dragons that Gwyn fought, and he's just been there the whole time, like the stillness of the dragons. And
I mean, it's just the fact, and I can't fault the game for this. I honestly can't, because it's a sequel, and it's doing basically what a sequel should do, which is like basically just building off of what the first one built. It's just the fact that Lothric itself doesn't have that much of a personality. It's the stuff that converged into it at the fading of the fire or whatever that's interesting, and a lot of that stuff is just from Dark Souls 1. And it's interesting to see where that stuff has led to from Dark Souls 1, but the world itself in Dark Souls 3 doesn't have that same. And I guess I'm equalizing world building and lore building in a way that maybe I shouldn't be, but they're really connected to me because of Dark Souls 1. But it doesn't have a personality of its own the way that 1 did to me. Especially when you look at, like, I don't know what is the Smoldering Lake and the Catacombs and the Irithyll Dungeon. What is all that stuff?
What do you mean, what is it all?
Like, what is it? What's the story behind
the Smoldering Lake is Ash Lake.
Okay. I didn't piece that together.
There all those arch trees out in the distance.
Yeah.
It's all just embers now. And the dungeon...
But why is it embers?
...was built, I'm pretty sure, by Pontiff Sulivan. Because the demon flame sputtered out and all the demons are essentially dead. Like, that's the only place in the game with demons.
Yeah.
Besides that one wandering one up on the bridge. And even that, I thought, was a really great moment where he looks like he's totally overgrown and made of stone almost, and he breaks in half as you fight him. Like, there are lots of nice touches like that in this game. And I'm pretty sure that the Irithyll dungeon is built by Pontiff Sulivan, who has his own... But... Oh yeah, and then there's the Profane Capital. And,
I didn't know anything about the Profane Capital. I didn't get that.
Yorm's story is really sad.
I kind of know his general story of, like, people didn't trust him because he's a giant, and he gave them the swords as, like, a peace offering almost, as, like, here, I trust you with these swords that can destroy me.
Yeah, he does that.
But now he has the swords.
And he accidentally killed all those people.
How did he do it accidentally? Or he went crazy, I thought.
No, by linking the fire.
And went crazy.
Or no, I'm pretty sure. It was,
I don't know.
It was either that, him trying to, like, put out the profane flame, or it said, like, fire from the sky, so it could actually be dragons killed everyone in the Profane Capital. But either way, he was unable to save his people, which is all he wanted to do. And even then, when that's all he ever wanted to do, his people never respected him. And it's just a neat little self-contained story. And there's more, like, substance to each of those little stories in this game. Siegmeyer... Wait. Siegward. Yeah, I was mixing it up because I was going to say Siegward is much better than Siegmeyer ever was. He is maybe the best NPC in the series. I fucking love Siegward. He's great.
And I only experienced the first part of his story because I happened to walk
missed
past
out.
the well that he was in, and I never expected it to be in. This is a thing that they've always done with these games. The way that you go through the quests is so obscure and impossible to follow on your first playthrough. I don't know how anyone does it. I never went to the well, so I never got his... It's in the corner, off on the side. There's no pickup or anything over there. It's just a well over there that apparently you're supposed to walk by to hear his dialogue come out of it so that you know to talk to him. That's crazy. And then the thief...
You can hear it, though.
Send him off at the
and that's
wrong
the same
time,
way. That's the same way you figure out how to get off the lift. Because you hear him humming to himself.
Yeah, but you go up the lift. That's a very obvious part of the level that you're going to go on. The well is over there in the corner.
No, you can hear it. When you walk out the chapel, you can hear it.
I didn't hear it. Maybe I missed it.
I don't know. That is true. It's easy to fail these quests. But if you are really, like, paying attention and trying to follow one, then it works.
I don't think so. I tried to follow the Siegward, and I was like, when is he going to show up again? And then he never did because I didn't see the well, or I didn't hear him out of the well, or whatever. That's just so... Why is it
either way, Siegward's quest not only is amazing, but Siegward himself is just such a memorable, dumb guy. He's great.
I wouldn't know because I didn't do his quest, except for that first part, which I liked the first part. It was cool. To see how he's like the opposite of Siegmeyer, that's neat. But I don't know.
Wait, how's he the opposite of Siegmeyer?
You didn't get... So Siegmeyer is... Siegmeyer.
You have to help him all the time.
Yeah, because he's charging headfirst in these situations that he shouldn't be. Yeah. And Siegward is timid and won't make forward progress without you because he's too undecided.
I don't think they're really opposites. Siegward...
Well, they're opposite in that aspect.
I guess, but Siegmeyer, the first time you meet him... The first time you meet Siegmeyer, he's just sitting there outside...
True, he's trying to figure out what to do next, and he won't. You're right. I think that's. I thought that was kind of the point.
By the way, it still is an interesting spin on the concept of helping a dumb onion knight through the game.
But yeah, Siegward doesn't even mention that he goes to the chapel, says Cody in the chat, which is like, at least if I was looking for him there, then I would maybe find him because I'm like, oh, well, I never saw Siegward. I got to go back and find him. But I didn't know where to go. And then Henri. And her little
Henri of Astura.
Yeah.
That's a great quest.
I stumbled across her in that bonfire where the road of sacrifices is or whatever. And then never saw her again. Well, I saw her in Firelink and then never saw her again. And I thought...
You didn't see her in the catacombs?
No.
Wow.
I don't know where she was. Or I don't know if she did appear.
She appears twice in the catacombs.
I thought that I fucked up the quest because I joined the Fingers Covenant. and I thought that's why I didn't see her. But then when I completed the game, I went back to the Fingers Covenant to reset my stats, and then she appeared in Firelink and said I was doing something bad. So apparently that's not why I failed the quest, or that's not why she didn't show up, or maybe I just missed her. I don't know. But I never saw her in the catacombs.
So, okay, how much of the other endings do you have spoiled for you?
I don't have the other endings spoiled, but I was gonna look them up anyway. I wasn't gonna like play through the game for every ending or anything.
Okay. Then Henri's I will totally grant this, that the way to advance these quest lines is just so easy to fail.
Yeah, it's insane.
And I on a couple of
How are
them
you supposed to
I
know
failed
that joining
them.
the fingers
I
would
failed
fail?
a couple of them even well that I don't so much mind cuz that no, I really don't mind that because that is like there's Cirrus who is aligned with the Darkmans, and if you join the Evil Covenant, she hates you. And that makes total sense. And it should work and it should work. You're not supposed to work that way. Because it doesn't care if you know that. It's just that if you decide to join this Evil Covenant that, you know, is a red sign soapstone and the PvP and it's this terrible monstrosity, and if you just pledge yourself to that, then somebody who's committed to justice and the American way isn't going to like you anymore. And that's fine, and you can just do it differently on your next playthrough.
I didn't even realize that it was the Evil Covenant. I just found
I thought that was pretty clear.
I found them in the chapel, and it was like, oh, here's a new covenant, and I joined it, or I didn't. I turned out I didn't join it, but I pledged myself to get the item to join it or whatever.
Yeah, I don't really mind being able to fail quests for like in-universe reasons. But there were a couple of NPC side quests that I failed on my New Game Plus playthrough, even when I was looking for them, because you really have to be so on it of talking to the right people at the right times.
Well, you have to. So you have to talk to Yorm. No, is that his name?
No, that's the boss.
Yoel
of Londor.
You have to talk to him 5 times before he dies, and he dies when you get to the catacombs or something.
Yeah, he does pretty early.
And I didn't do that, so I didn't get that quest line, which is like,
that
how
quest
the
line,
fuck are you supposed to know that?
That quest line is probably best saved for a second playthrough, though.
Well,
like, that is the longest,
anyway.
That is the most extensive side quest in the game, and it opens up a new ending.
And then Patches, I know that there's tons of places where Patches shows up, and I didn't find any of them. He just showed up in Firelink one.
Patches, okay, this pissed me off the second time through. I was looking for Patches. I missed him completely my first playthrough. Never saw Patches once. He made no appearance.
Are you sure he wasn't in Firelink?
Yep.
Up in the corner?
He made no appearance in Firelink or anywhere.
Let me tell you what happened with me first. I never saw him, and I went up there in Firelink at one point and saw him in the corner and talked to him, and he was like, hey, you don't blame me for that thing that happened earlier.
That happened to me in my second playthrough. When you go up into that gate above Firelink where you buy the key and go up there. Well, I walk up the stairs, and I go to the top and get the Firekeeper Soul. I come back down, and I see there's some stuff on the roof of Firelink. And so, alright, I'm just going to drop down there and get some items. And then I met the crows and all that, and I get back down to Firelink, and of course, I missed the event where he locks you in that gate.
Is that what I missed too, I guess? Because I dropped down to get the items in the tower.
Yep, that's how it happens. And on my first playthrough, I actually did that too late, and he just never showed up.
Yeah, that shit is so bad to me. Like, none of that is well done to me.
I love the in-universe stuff, but I don't like the easy fail checks. However, Yoel of Londor and Henri of Astora's quests, they intertwine, and that is one of the best side quest lines in all these games.
Well, it's a shame I didn't experience them.
Yeah,
because
and that
the game is designed so obscurely.
That one in particular, I think it needs to be obscure, because the premise of that whole ending is to transcend the cycle, and you really have to work for it. And the way it happens is so, like, even by this game's standards, the series standards, it's just occult and feels terribly wrong. And did you ever get Yuria of Londor to show up? If he dies after you do it 5 times?
No, because I didn't do it 5 times. I did it like 4 times.
If he dies, if Yoel of Londor dies, then you have 5 Dark Sigils. Then Yuria of Londor shows up.
Yeah.
And she's even stranger. She seems to be a human. And she kind of keeps she sells the dark hand item, like that the dark wraiths used, and just really strange. And if you kill her, then she says, "Koth, I failed you," and that is one of the only references in the entire game to the serpents.
There's the statues.
There's the statues, and that's it. Besides this one line of dialogue, and it just feels like, well, it just makes sense. The first game, the dark ending, it didn't work because we learn in this one that even if you let the fire fade, just like it happened in the very, very beginning, the flames will pop out on the horizon, and that's just how this metaphysics works. But there's a permanent solution, and Koth just seems to want the fire to end somehow, and he stops at nothing to do it. Frampt is nowhere to be seen.
That's neat. It just sucks that you basically can't do it without a guide. That's the way I see it.
You could do it without a guide.
I would have absolutely no idea where to start because like I said, I never saw her the second time. I don't know where in the catacombs she shows up. I don't know if I missed her or if she just didn't show up for me, because I can't trust the game because of patches glitching or not glitching, just not working.
I had no trouble with Henri just progressing normally. Henri was at every point, and I got to every part of Henri's quest except the part that doesn't happen unless you initiate the Yol of Londor quest.
I don't know what happened with me then. I don't know how I missed it.
Yeah, that's very strange. Anyway, just overall, the bosses in this game are the best in the series. The PvP is the most fun in the series. It's just, this is such a good game.
I'm ready for another non-Souls game.
Yes! And
I don't want another Souls game.
That reminds me. After Dark Souls 3 came out, this is like last week or something, or no, I think it was just a couple days ago, Miyazaki did an interview with some like gaming website in Japan, and it was very crudely translated, but I looked at just the Google Translate, and then there was somebody in the thread who was like better at translating, and they gave their own interpretation, and this is what he said in paraphrased translation: that as the president of the company, I won't stop like a team from making another Dark Souls game because we are a company, and that would be irresponsible. But to me, Dark Souls is over. I am already working on a new IP.
Good.
Yeah.
Because
it's really good.
There were some issues with Bloodborne and things that changed. Some that I hated, like the
blood
health
vials.
recovery thing sucked ass, and I'm still pissed about it. But
the whole the concept was great of just taking a blood vial, it
was cool.
That was cool, but having to buy them and sit through a load screen before you can buy them,
all that bullshit was just totally stupid. I hated that. But yeah, I loved that they did something completely different and did this completely different setting, and it worked. It was cool. It was interesting, and I think part of my I don't want to act like I'm disappointed in Dark Souls 3 because like all I've been is negative. The only reason I've been negative is because I'm on a slightly lower level of excitement than you are, and so everything is lower for me. I still thought it was a great game. Still one of the best games of the year, definitely. And like I said, objectively the best Dark Souls game. But everything felt like it didn't feel new enough, maybe, to really excite me, to really get my blood flowing. It just felt like, okay, I'm playing another Souls game, and so much of it was iterative,
It had my
I
cock
don't mind
flowing.
that because it's a sequel. Like I said, I shouldn't fault it for that because it is a sequel, and it's acting like a sequel. It's treating itself like a sequel, and that's fine. But like I said, I'm ready for something that's not Souls or not Dark Souls.
This felt like the definitive end of Dark Souls.
Yeah.
Everything about it, especially the last boss. It's like, this is it. Nothing past this will be remotely credible.
And I wouldn't mind if they did another Dark Souls game or Souls game that was just totally different, but I don't want one that's
like
the
set of mechanics is
well, sure, they're always
fantastic.
With that
Yeah.
They figured it out,
but like a sci-fi game like this, can you imagine? or like a really dark almost like Alien.
Yeah.
Like on a space station and figuring out what's going on and just some crazy horrific shit.
You could do some cool stuff.
There's
definitely.
so much.
Yeah, I'm really hopeful. But yeah, I mean, overall, I've enjoyed the game a lot. I just don't have the same high that everyone else has for it right now.
Well, I mean, I guess a lot of that comes down to the PvE that you don't seem to get the same satisfaction out of.
Yeah, and that's always kind of how it's been for the Souls games for me. Is that like Dark Souls 1 was awesome because you're learning it, you're getting that excitement of like, oh, that's what this does, that's what this does. I'm figuring this game out. And then with 3, I'm not figuring much out. I'm just kind of playing through another Souls game, so it doesn't have that feeling to it. And I don't get that same amount of satisfaction from just. I enjoy going through the areas a lot more than I do fighting the bosses. Like once I fought a boss 3 times, I'm done with them. I don't want to do them anymore.
I just am not that way at all. The bosses are. I don't want to say the reason I play these games because the areas and the exploration and the story, it's also so good. But I mean, those are the highlights of the series for me. Those, along with those iconic moments where you walk out over Anne Orlando, or when you go into the untended graves, or when you.
I mean, I still consider like the bosses like some of the most most iconic moments and parts of those games. They're just not something that I get this sentiment from a lot of people saying like, I wish you could just replay the bosses. Like I think it's too.
I don't think you should be able to.
But the fact that people want to is that blows my mind. It's like once I'm done with the boss, I don't want to fucking do it again. Fuck no. I'm done with it.
I don't get that. I just have a different perspective.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because that's the thing. I would love to be able to replay the bosses, but I know it would be bad to be able to. Because part of what makes Dark Souls 1 and 3 so good is that the bosses aren't just video game challenges.
Mm-hmm.
They are parts of the world, and you have to eliminate them to advance or get what they have. Or
and that's I agree with you on that, and that's the same reason that I don't like the fast travel system being so easy. And also, God, we mentioned this last podcast, but it bears repeating because there was some more moments. There was one in particular moment with the bonfires. The Dragon Slayer armor bonfire is probably 20 feet from the Archives bonfire. Like you go through a very small section of doors, like 2 doors, and then you're at the Archives bonfire. It feels like they added the fact that you get a bonfire when you beat a boss late in the development or something, and they didn't switch around any of the bonfires. They just said, okay, if you defeat a boss, you get a bonfire. And it just creates some really weird moments like that, which like that's not a huge complaint against the game or anything, but it feels like it cheapens the feeling of finding a bonfire when they're so numerous, you know?
There's
not a lot of areas where you finally get to the bonfire and you go, whew, I'm there. I didn't get that feeling as much, nearly as much.
I did have that, but there were more moments when I opened up a shortcut and I'm like, oh, thank God I'm back at the bonfire, which I think is better than thank God I found a new bonfire.
It's more
because if you've been going, there were a couple moments where I was glad I found the new bonfire. I didn't even notice, in retrospect, how close those 2 bonfires are, the Archives and the Dragon Slayer armor, just because I don't know, like going back from a boss to a bonfire isn't that interesting to me. It feels like, oh, I'm done. I'm ready to bounce. And I don't know, and there's still a justification for it in the world, which is that all the bosses are heirs of fire. And
it's cool.
It makes
like
sense
that
they're
out
of their bones and ashes.
That's cool. It just mechanically, if they had come up with that earlier on, maybe then you wouldn't have the Archives bonfire. You'd make the Archives bonfire, which I think would be way cooler. But I don't know. It just feels weird. It would be interesting to me.
I did not get the weird
and this would be maybe really hard and maybe not so much fun. But it would be really interesting if all the bonfires in the game were bosses. If like that's your bonfire, like you put down your Archives bonfire where you beat the Dragon Slayer armor and then you're on to the next boss. It would require a lot more of that cyclical level design maybe, But then you're on to the Lothric. Well, that's not a good example because then it's dead ends, which is another complaint I have, I guess. But yeah, if each section of the game that had a boss just had one bonfire and the areas were interconnected enough to justify that would be really cool.
That could have been interesting.
That'd be tough, I know, but yeah, it just feels like there's a ton of them, and that I didn't struggle with the game, and part of that's just me getting better at these games. But with the Bloodborne, I could remember from back when I was complaining about that first section because I was having so much trouble.
Good. That is that's the best area in the series.
And it's a great area, but it takes forever to get back to your bonfire. And so when you're there, you're like, oh, thank God. And I never got that with this.
But what sucked in that game is that there was no relief once you got there because touching it didn't heal you. That was so fucking dumb.
You had to go back and you got to go through all the loading screens. But yeah, imagine if that sense of relief was in this game where you actually could go back to Firelink and all that, and it just doesn't have that to me.
Except for all the things that they fixed from Dark Souls 2 by essentially just going back to Dark Souls 1 design. Even though I think Miyazaki and From are clearly improving at making these games as they continue on.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really a company that learns from themselves all that well.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have, like, speaking to the Firekeeper. In Demon Souls, they had it so when you talked to her, she just did her speech while you leveled up.
Yeah.
And they forgot about that. In this, they just forgot. It's the Zelda problem. That happens so much in the Zelda games.
But the details are important, and that is a good point. Yeah, there's a few things where there's a few improvements that they did make that I was like, okay, that's nice. Like lighting the bonfire makes you spawn at the bonfire that you lit without having to reset the level, which is something that I always wanted in Dark Souls 1.
And not having armor upgrades. Holy shit. That is such a good change. Yeah. That is a fantastic change.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, they're getting better. They're just they do make some baffling decisions still, and we shouldn't discount the fact that this game has had some broken stuff on launch, including like online interactions,
those crashes,
floating around, and the crashes at the bonfire, and some other weird netcode issues on multiplayer where people can't play with each other and stuff. Just there's been some weird issues. That shouldn't exist when you've got like the 5th game in this style, 6th game in this style of multiplayer and single player. Yeah, because you've got Demon Souls. Well, no, it's
5.
It's 5.
And 4 by Miyazaki.
Yeah, but still, I mean, it's just like they should figure that out. Jesus Christ. But yeah, cool.
I'm just glad the game was good.
It is definitely a good game. I definitely agree on that point. So yeah,
we've been going for a while.
We've been going. So if you're not into Dark Souls,
sorry. I think because I'm starving, I think we should like PvP after this.
Okay, I'll do that.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But was there something else you wanted to talk about?
Not really. This is going to be so underwhelming after all that. 2 quick news items. One is, I thought this was worth mentioning. The Doom, I think, beta is out right now, and apparently is just really awful and cringy.
Yeah, I heard it sucks.
First of all, if you look at screenshots of it, you would honestly think it was a Halo game. It's amazing that they just basically created the Halo characters for their multiplayer characters. Also, there's like animations and stuff you can unlock, and one of them's Gangnam Style. So that should give you a general impression of where the developers are at, pop culture wise, and yeah.
That's
doesn't
real?
seem like a very good game.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Wow. I would never have expected anyone to be that dumb.
But switching over to good games, I haven't tried this yet. Rocket League released a basketball game mode where the goals are slightly elevated up, so you have to shoot the ball up in the air, and it looks like a lot of fun to me. It looks pretty cool.
It would probably be cool for like advanced players.
Yeah, for like people who really know their aerials, it creates a whole new dynamic. It's just so cool. Like you can make relatively minor changes to just how the little field is laid out in that game, and it totally changes the the style of how you play it and everything. It's a cool game. But yeah, that's it. So, Dark Souls, the podcast.
Yeah, buddy.
Next week, maybe we'll have something else to talk about. I don't know.
Maybe. I will be graduating very soon.
It's exciting.
Becoming a real boy. So yeah, tune in for that, folks. See ya.
Bye.